On New Year's, Mom and Dad blocked my way in the hallway. "Nobody invited you? Get out." Behind them, I saw my brother, my aunt, even my ex-friend at the holiday table. I silently turned around, got in my car, and dialed a number. Half an hour later, my phone was exploding, and panic broke out in the house. My name is Jake, and I never thought I'd be sitting here, telling this story. But after everything that happened on New Year's Eve, I realized some stories need to be told. They need to be heard. Maybe someone out there will understand what it feels like when your own family turns their back on you. And maybe they'll find strength in what happened next. It all started about 6 months before that terrible New Year's night. I was 26, working as a shift supervisor at a manufacturing plant in Ohio. Not glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and I was proud of what I did. My parents, Carol and Bob, lived in the same town where I grew up. My younger brother Tyler was 23, fresh out of college with some business degree that made him think he knew everything about life. We used to be close, Tyler and I. Growing up, I was the one who taught him how to ride a bike, helped him with his homework, covered for him when he got in trouble with our parents. I was the protective older brother who would have done anything for him. Looking back now, I wonder if that was my first mistake. Caring too much, giving too much of myself to people who didn't deserve it. The trouble started when I began dating Sarah, this girl I met at a friend's barbecue in July. Sarah was beautiful. Long blonde hair, bright blue eyes, the kind of smile that could light up a room. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office and had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her feel good. I fell for her hard and fast. Within 2 months, we were practically inseparable. My family seemed to love her too. Mom would invite her over for Sunday dinners, and Sarah would sit there charming everyone with stories from her work or compliments about Mom's cooking. Dad, who was usually pretty reserved with my girlfriends, would actually engage in real conversations with her about current events and local sports. Even Tyler, who had always been somewhat competitive with me, seemed genuinely happy that I'd found someone special. Jake's really hit the jackpot with this one, I remember Tyler saying to our parents one evening after Sarah had left. "She's smart, funny, beautiful. You better not mess this up, big brother." I laughed it off, but inside I was thinking the same thing. Sarah felt different from all the other girls I'd dated. She seemed genuinely interested in my life, my dreams, my fears. She would listen when I talked about wanting to maybe go back to school someday, about my hopes of eventually starting my own business. She made me feel like I could be more than just a factory worker from a small town in Ohio. The first sign that something wasn't right came in early October. I was supposed to pick Sarah up from work. But when I got to the dental office, her coworker Melissa told me she'd left early with a headache. I drove to her apartment, but her car wasn't there. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. She finally called me back around 9 that night, apologizing profusely and saying she'd been at her sister's house dealing with some family drama and her phone had died. It was a reasonable explanation, but something felt off. Sarah's voice sounded different, strained, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. And when I asked about her sister, she gave these vague answers that didn't really tell me anything. But I pushed down my doubts. I trusted her. I loved her. The second incident happened a few weeks later. Sarah and I had plans to go to a movie on Friday night, but she canceled last minute, saying she had to work late. I was disappointed but understanding. We all have to work late sometimes. But when I drove past the dental office around 8 p.m., it was dark and empty. The parking lot was completely deserted. When I confronted her about it the next day, Sarah got defensive in a way I'd never seen before. Her cheeks flushed red, and she started talking fast, explaining that they'd moved to the back office to do some inventory, and that's why the front lights were off. She was so convincing, so earnest in her explanation, that I felt guilty for even questioning her. She made me feel like I was being paranoid and possessive. "Jake, you know I love you," she said, taking my hands in hers. "Why would I lie to you about something so stupid? You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Looking into her eyes, hearing those words, I melted. I apologized for doubting her and promised I'd trust her more. But deep down, a tiny seed of suspicion had been planted, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make it go away completely. November passed without any major incidents, and I started to relax. Sarah and I were spending more time together, making plans for the holidays. She'd even started talking about moving in together after the new year. Everything seemed to be getting back to normal, back to the way it was when we first started dating. My family continued to adore her. Mom started including her in conversations about Christmas plans, and Dad actually asked for her opinion when he was thinking about buying a new truck. Tyler and Sarah had developed this easy friendship where they would text each other funny memes and inside jokes. Sometimes I'd catch them laughing together about something on their phones. And when I'd ask what was so funny, they'd just say, "You had to be there," or "It's not really that funny." At the time, I thought it was great that my girlfriend got along so well with my family. I'd had relationships before where the girl barely tolerated my parents and actively disliked Tyler. Having Sarah fit in so seamlessly felt like a blessing. It felt like everything was falling into place. The week before Christmas, Sarah surprised me by saying she wanted to get Tyler a really nice present. "He's been so sweet to me," she said. "I want to get him something special, something that shows how much I appreciate him welcoming me into the family." She ended up buying him this expensive watch, way more expensive than what I could afford to spend on Christmas presents. When I asked her about it, she said she'd gotten a Christmas bonus at work and wanted to use some of it to spoil the people she cared about. It was thoughtful, maybe too thoughtful, but I was touched by how much she cared about my brother's feelings. Christmas Day itself was perfect. We had dinner at my parents' house, exchanged gifts, played board games, and watched old movies. Sarah fit right in, helping Mom in the kitchen, discussing college football with Dad, and joking around with Tyler. She gave me a beautiful leather jacket that I'd been eyeing for months, and I gave her a necklace with a small diamond pendant that took me 3 months to save up for. "I love you, Jake," she whispered in my ear as we sat on my parents' couch watching It's a Wonderful Life. This has been the best Christmas of my life. I squeezed her hand and kissed the top of her head. In that moment, surrounded by my family, with the woman I loved in my arms, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. I had no idea that exactly 1 week later, my entire world would come crashing down in the most devastating way possible. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of lazy days and cozy nights. Sarah and I spent most of our time together, either at my apartment or hers, just enjoying each other's company. We talked about our resolutions for the new year, about the possibility of her moving in with me, about maybe taking a vacation together in the spring. On New Year's Eve morning, Mom called to remind me about their annual New Year's party. My parents had been hosting this party for as long as I could remember. Nothing too fancy, just close family and friends gathering to ring in the new year together. It was tradition, and I was looking forward to bringing Sarah and celebrating our first New Year's as a couple. But around 3 p.m., Sarah called with disappointing news. Her friend Emma was having a crisis, some kind of family emergency, and needed Sarah to come over and provide moral support. Sarah felt terrible about missing the party, especially since my parents had been so excited about her coming. "I'm so sorry, Jake," she said, and I could hear genuine regret in her voice. "I know how important this party is to your family, but Emma really needs me right now. She's going through something really difficult, and I can't just abandon her." I was disappointed, but I understood. That was one of the things I loved about Sarah. She was loyal to her friends and always willing to help people in need. We agreed that I'd go to my parents' party alone, and she'd text me at midnight so we could at least share the moment virtually. "I'll make it up to you," she promised. "Maybe we can have our own private New Year's celebration tomorrow night." I hung up feeling slightly let down, but not suspicious. Sarah had never given me any reason not to trust her explanations. Her friend Emma had seemed like a sweet girl the few times I'd met her, and it made sense that she would turn to Sarah in a crisis. I spent the rest of the afternoon getting ready for the party, trying to shake off my disappointment about Sarah not being there. I put on my best shirt, the one Sarah always said brought out my eyes, and drove over to my parents' house around 7 p.m. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. The house smelled like Mom's famous cheese dip and Dad's homemade chili. There were about 15 people there. My parents' closest friends, my Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike, a few neighbors, and of course, Tyler. Everyone seemed to be in a great mood, laughing and sharing stories from the past year. "Where's Sarah?" Mom asked almost immediately. I saved her some of that spinach salad she loved so much at Christmas. I explained about Emma's emergency, and everyone nodded sympathetically. "That's so sweet of her to be there for her friend," Aunt Linda said. "You found yourself a good one, Jake." But something felt different that night. Maybe it was just because Sarah wasn't there, but the energy seemed off somehow. Tyler kept checking his phone and seemed distracted. When I tried to talk to him about his job or his plans for the new year, his answers were short and vague. He kept looking toward the hallway like he was expecting someone to arrive. Around 9 p.m., I went to the bathroom, and as I was walking back down the hallway, I heard Tyler talking quietly on his phone in Dad's study. The door was slightly open, and I could hear him saying something about making sure she knows and can't let him find out yet. When he saw me approaching, he quickly ended the call and came out of the room, acting like nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just work stuff," he said. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. The rest of the evening passed in a strange haze. Everyone was friendly and included me in conversations. But I kept feeling like I was missing something. Like there were undercurrents I couldn't quite grasp. People would stop talking when I approached, or they'd exchange glances that I couldn't interpret. As midnight approached, I found myself standing alone on my parents' back porch, looking at my phone. Sarah hadn't texted me like she promised, and when I tried calling her, it went straight to voicemail. I told myself she was probably just busy comforting Emma and had lost track of time. Inside the house, I could hear the countdown beginning. 10, 9, 8. I stayed outside, hoping Sarah would call at the last second. 7, 6, 5. My phone remained silent. 4, 3, 2, 1. "Happy New Year," everyone shouted from inside. But I felt anything but happy. I was alone on New Year's Eve, and the woman I loved hadn't even bothered to call. I went back inside and put on a smile, accepting hugs and well wishes from everyone. But underneath, I was hurt and confused. This wasn't like Sarah. Even if she was dealing with her friend's crisis, she would have found a way to at least send a quick text. Something wasn't right. The party wound down around 1:30 a.m., and I helped my parents clean up before heading home. Tyler left early, claiming he had a headache, which was unusual for him. He was typically the last one to leave any family gathering, always wanting to squeeze every bit of fun out of the night. I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe Emma's crisis was worse than Sarah had let on. Maybe Sarah's phone really had died, and she couldn't find a charger. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation for everything that was bothering me. But when I got to my apartment and checked social media, my world shifted. Emma had posted pictures from her own New Year's Eve party, pictures that were time-stamped throughout the evening, showing her laughing and celebrating with a bunch of people I didn't recognize. She certainly didn't look like someone in the middle of a family crisis. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the photos. In several of them, I could see Emma's apartment in the background, the same apartment where Sarah was supposedly providing comfort and support. But Sarah was nowhere to be seen in any of the pictures. Emma looked happy, carefree, definitely not like someone who needed emergency emotional support. I tried calling Sarah again, straight to voicemail. I sent her a text asking if everything was okay. No response. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Emma had rallied and decided to have people over after Sarah had helped her work through whatever was bothering her. Maybe Sarah had left before the party started. But deep down, I knew I was making excuses. The evidence was right there in front of me. Emma was fine, had been fine all evening, and Sarah had lied to me about where she was and what she was doing. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's smiling face in those party photos. Heard Sarah's voice telling me about the family emergency that apparently didn't exist. I kept checking my phone, hoping for some message from Sarah that would explain everything. But my phone remained silent. The next morning, New Year's Day, I woke up with a splitting headache and a stomach full of anxiety. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, trying to decide what to do. Should I confront Sarah directly? Should I try to find out where she really was last night? Should I just wait and see what explanation she offered? Around 10 a.m., my phone finally rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and my heart started racing. I took a deep breath and answered. "Jake," she said, and her voice sounded bright and cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "Happy New Year, baby. I'm so sorry I didn't call you last night. Things got really crazy with Emma, and by the time everything calmed down, it was like 3 a.m, and I didn't want to wake you." "How is Emma doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, much better today. We talked through everything, and she's feeling a lot more positive about the situation. Thanks for being so understanding about me missing the party. I know how much it meant to you to have me there." She sounded so sincere, so convincing. If I hadn't seen those photos, I would have believed every word she said. But I had seen them, and I knew she was lying to my face. "That's good to hear," I said. "I'm glad you could help her through whatever was going on." We talked for a few more minutes about my parents' party and our plans for the day. Sarah suggested we meet for lunch to properly celebrate the new year together. I agreed, but every word felt forced. Every response felt like acting in a play I didn't want to be in. We met at this little diner we both loved, and Sarah was her usual charming self, asking about the party, laughing at my stories about Uncle Mike's terrible karaoke performance, being affectionate and attentive. But I kept studying her face, looking for signs of deception, trying to reconcile the woman sitting across from me with the evidence I'd seen on social media. "You seem quiet today," she said about halfway through our meal. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just tired," I said. "Late night, you know." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm really sorry I missed it, Jake. I promise I'll make it up to you. Maybe we can plan our own little celebration for next weekend?" Looking into her eyes, seeing what appeared to be genuine regret and affection, I almost convinced myself that I was being paranoid. Maybe there was an explanation I wasn't seeing. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions based on incomplete information. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Tyler texted me this morning to check on Emma too," she said casually. "He's such a sweet guy, always thinking about other people." Tyler had texted her about Emma. How did Tyler even know about Emma's supposed crisis? I hadn't mentioned it to anyone at the party except my parents, and they certainly wouldn't have discussed it with Tyler. The only way Tyler would know about Emma was if Sarah had told him directly. But why would Sarah be texting with my brother about her whereabouts? Why would Tyler be checking on a girl he'd never met? None of it made sense, unless... I felt sick to my stomach as the possibility hit me. Tyler's distracted behavior at the party, his mysterious phone call, Sarah's expensive gift to him at Christmas. All those times I'd caught them laughing together over their phones. The way they seemed to have inside jokes I wasn't part of. "When did Tyler text you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Sarah's eyes flickered for just a moment, and I saw something there. Fear? Guilt? "Oh, this morning. Early this morning. He said he'd been thinking about what I'd told him at Christmas about Emma's family situation, and he wanted to make sure everything worked out okay." Another lie. Sarah had never mentioned Emma's family situation at Christmas because, as far as I knew, there wasn't one. Emma's family lived in the same town, and they all seemed to get along fine. Sarah was digging herself deeper into deception, and apparently Tyler was somehow involved. I managed to get through the rest of lunch without revealing what I was thinking. But inside I was falling apart. The woman I loved, the woman I'd been planning a future with, was lying to me. And somehow, my own brother was part of whatever was going on. That afternoon, after Sarah and I parted ways, I did something I'd never done before. I started investigating. I drove past Emma's apartment complex and saw her car in its usual spot. I checked her social media again and found more photos from the previous night, including some that were posted after 3 a.m. There was no sign that she'd been dealing with any kind of crisis. Then I did something that made me feel like a stalker. But I couldn't stop myself. I drove to the area where Tyler lived, not really knowing what I was looking for, just following this terrible instinct that was growing stronger by the minute. Tyler rented a small house on the outskirts of town, in a quiet neighborhood where most of the residents were young professionals like him. As I turned onto his street, my heart nearly stopped. There, parked in his driveway next to his blue Honda, was Sarah's silver Toyota Camry. I pulled over about half a block away, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Sarah's car was at Tyler's house. Sarah, who was supposed to be at Emma's dealing with a family emergency. Sarah, who had just had lunch with me 2 hours ago and made plans to see me again later in the week. I sat there for almost an hour, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to march up to the door and confront them both. Part of me wanted to drive away and pretend I'd never seen anything. But mostly, I just felt numb, like I was watching this happen to someone else. Around 4 p.m., I saw movement at Tyler's front window. The curtains shifted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of someone looking out toward the street. A few minutes later, Sarah's car backed out of the driveway. But instead of leaving immediately, it pulled around to the back of the house, out of sight from the street. That's when I knew for certain that my worst fears were true. Sarah wasn't just lying about where she was. She was actively hiding from me. She and Tyler were together, and they were being careful not to be seen. I drove home in a daze, my mind struggling to process what I'd discovered. The woman I loved was betraying me with my own brother. The two people I trusted most in the world were conspiring against me, lying to my face, making me feel like I was going crazy for suspecting something was wrong. But it was wrong. Everything was wrong. And I had no idea how long it had been going on or how deep the deception went. That night, I barely ate dinner. I kept staring at my phone, waiting for Sarah to text or call, wondering what new lie she would tell me about how she'd spent her day. When she finally did call around 8 p.m., I could barely stand to hear her voice. "Hey, baby," she said, sounding perfectly normal. "How was the rest of your day?" I ended up taking a nap and running some errands. Pretty boring stuff. "Yeah, mine was pretty quiet too," I managed to say. We talked for a few minutes about nothing important, and she mentioned that she was going to have a quiet evening at home, maybe watch a movie and go to bed early. Another lie. I knew exactly where she was and who she was with. After we hung up, I sat in my living room trying to figure out what to do next. I could confront them, but what would that accomplish? They would probably just deny everything and come up with more elaborate lies. I could tell my parents, but that would tear our family apart, and I wasn't even sure they would believe me. Or I could wait. I could gather more evidence, figure out exactly what was going on, and then decide how to handle it. The problem was, every day I waited was another day of living with the knowledge that the two people closest to me were betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. I decided to wait, but not for long. I needed to know the truth. All of it. How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or were they actually in love? Did my parents know? Was the whole family in on it? Or were Tyler and Sarah fooling everyone? The next few days were torture. I went to work, came home, lived my normal life. But everything felt fake and hollow. When Sarah called or texted, I responded like nothing was wrong. But inside I was screaming. When Tyler called to ask about getting together for beer and pool like we did most weekends, I made excuses. "You feeling okay, man?" he asked. "You've been kind of distant lately." The audacity of it, him expressing concern about my well-being while he was sleeping with my girlfriend behind my back, made me want to throw my phone against the wall. But I just told him I was tired from work and we'd hang out soon. 3 days after New Year's, I made a decision. I was going to follow them, document what they were doing, and confront them with evidence they couldn't deny. I felt like a private investigator in some cheap movie, but I needed to know the truth. That Thursday evening, I parked down the street from Sarah's apartment and waited. Around 7 p.m., she came out, got in her car, and drove toward Tyler's side of town. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding with each turn. Sure enough, she pulled into Tyler's driveway and disappeared into his house. I sat in my car, taking pictures with my phone, documenting the time and location. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that there was some innocent explanation for why my girlfriend was spending evening after evening at my brother's house. But deep down, I knew better. Around 10 p.m., I saw lights go on in what I assumed was Tyler's bedroom. The curtains were closed, but I could see silhouettes moving around. That's when I finally accepted the full truth. They weren't just lying to me. They were having a relationship. A real, ongoing, physical relationship. I drove home that night, feeling like a different person than I'd been that morning. The naive, trusting Jake, who believed the best about people, was gone, replaced by someone harder, more cynical, but also more determined to take control of his own life. Over the next week, I gathered more evidence. I followed them to restaurants where they ate together like a real couple. I saw them holding hands walking through a park on the other side of town, where they thought no one would recognize them. I watched Sarah leave Tyler's house early in the morning, clearly having spent the night. Each piece of evidence felt like a knife in my chest. But I kept collecting it. I needed to have undeniable proof when I finally confronted them. I needed them to know that I knew everything, that their lies and deceptions were over. The hardest part was continuing to act normal with both of them. When Sarah called to make plans for the weekend, I had to pretend I was excited to see her. When Tyler invited me over to watch the playoffs, I had to make excuses without seeming suspicious. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. But I was also starting to feel something else alongside the pain and betrayal. Anger. Pure, clean anger at being treated like a fool. These two people had made me question my own sanity, had made me feel paranoid and possessive, when all along my instincts had been right. They had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. The anger felt good. It felt powerful. It made me want to do something more than just confront them privately and give them a chance to explain or apologize. I wanted consequences. I wanted them to face the full impact of what they'd done. That's when I started thinking about my parents' reaction if they knew what Tyler and Sarah were doing. Mom and Dad had welcomed Sarah into the family, had treated her like the daughter they never had. They trusted Tyler completely, believed he was the responsible, successful son who had his life together. Neither of them would take the news well, but they deserved to know what kind of people they were supporting and celebrating. I also started thinking about Sarah's job, her friends, her reputation in our small town. She had built an image as this sweet, loyal, trustworthy person, and everyone who met her believed it. But it was all a facade, and maybe it was time for people to see who she really was. The idea that really started to appeal to me, though, was timing. I could expose them privately. But that would give them time to craft their narrative, to minimize the damage, to paint me as the jealous, unstable ex-boyfriend. Or I could expose them publicly, dramatically, in a way that would make it impossible for them to control the story. And then I remembered. My parents always hosted a big party for the Super Bowl. It was another family tradition, usually with 20 or 30 people coming over to watch the game, eat Mom's famous chili, and socialize. Sarah had already been invited and had enthusiastically accepted. Tyler would obviously be there. Most of the important people in both their lives would be gathered in one place. The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. Instead of having dozens of separate, painful conversations with family members and friends, I could reveal the truth once, to everyone who mattered, and let the chips fall where they may. I started planning carefully. I needed evidence that would be immediately convincing. Photos, text messages if I could get them, maybe even video. I needed to be calm and factual when I presented it, not emotional or accusatory, so people would focus on what Tyler and Sarah had done rather than on my reaction to it. Most importantly, I needed to be prepared for the aftermath. This wouldn't just end their relationship. It would probably destroy Tyler's relationship with our parents, at least temporarily. It would definitely end any possibility of Sarah remaining part of our family. It would change everything, permanently, and I needed to be ready for that. 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, I made my biggest discovery yet. I had started checking Sarah's social media more carefully, looking at not just what she posted, but when she posted it and where she was when she posted it. That's when I noticed a pattern. Several times over the past few months, Sarah had posted photos or status updates that were geotagged near Tyler's house, but at times when she'd told me she was somewhere else entirely. A selfie posted from Tyler's neighborhood on a Tuesday afternoon when she'd said she was at work. A check-in at a restaurant near Tyler's place on a Saturday when she'd told me she was having dinner with her sister. But the smoking gun came when I was scrolling through some older posts and found a photo from November that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of Sarah wearing the expensive watch she'd supposedly bought for Tyler as a Christmas gift. She'd posted it in November with the caption, "Love my new watch." But she'd given that same watch to Tyler at Christmas, claiming it was a gift she'd bought specially for him. Which meant either she'd bought two identical expensive watches, unlikely given her salary, or the watch had been a gift from Tyler to her, which she'd then given back to him at Christmas to maintain the appearance of being a thoughtful girlfriend who cared about my family. Looking at that photo, I realized the level of planning and deception that had gone into their relationship. They hadn't just fallen into an affair. They'd been orchestrating an elaborate deception for months, maybe even before Sarah and I had started dating seriously. I screenshotted everything: the geotagged photos, the watch picture, time-stamped evidence of all the times Sarah had been near Tyler's house when she'd told me she was elsewhere. I organized it all into a folder on my phone, creating a timeline that told the story of their affair in undeniable detail. The final piece of evidence came 3 days before the Super Bowl party. I had taken a sick day from work and was sitting in my car near Tyler's house trying to get photos of them together, when I saw something that made me literally gasp out loud. Sarah's car pulled into Tyler's driveway around noon, which wasn't unusual anymore. But about an hour later, I saw Tyler come out of his house and go to Sarah's car. He opened the passenger door, leaned in, and kissed her. Not a quick peck, but a long, passionate kiss like you'd see in a romantic movie. Then he reached into the car and pulled out a small wrapped box, which he opened right there in the driveway. I couldn't see what was inside from my distance. But Sarah got out of the car and Tyler put something around her neck, a necklace, clearly. She threw her arms around him and they kissed again, swaying back and forth like they were dancing to music only they could hear. I managed to get several photos of this exchange, including clear shots of both their faces. There was no way they could claim this was innocent or platonic. This was a couple in love, celebrating something special, completely oblivious to the fact that they were being watched. That night, I sat in my apartment looking at those photos and feeling a strange sense of calm. The investigation was over. The evidence was overwhelming. In 3 days, at my parents' Super Bowl party, I was going to end this charade once and for all. But first, I needed to make one more preparation. I needed to decide exactly how to present this information for maximum impact. I thought about printing out the photos and passing them around. But that seemed too dramatic, too much like something out of a soap opera. Then I remembered that my dad always had the big screen TV set up for the game, and he usually connected someone's laptop to it at halftime to show family photos or funny videos. What if, instead of family photos, I showed my evidence folder? What if I got up during halftime when everyone was relaxed and gathered together and simply said I had something important to share? The more I thought about it, the more right it felt. Clean, direct, undeniable. Let the photos speak for themselves. Then step back and let Tyler and Sarah try to explain their way out of months of documented deception. I spent the weekend before the party organizing my presentation, making sure the photos were in chronological order, that the timeline was clear, that there was no way anyone could misunderstand what they were seeing. I also prepared myself mentally for the chaos that would follow. Tyler would probably try to turn it around on me, claim I was being obsessive or invasive. Sarah might cry and say she could explain everything. My parents would be shocked and hurt. The other guests would be uncomfortable and probably want to leave. But it would be the truth, finally, after months of lies. And everyone who cared about me would know exactly who they'd been supporting and defending. 2 days before the party, Sarah called to ask if she could bring anything to contribute to the food. The casual normalcy of the question, the way she was still playing the role of the devoted girlfriend planning ahead for a family gathering, made me feel almost sorry for her. She had no idea what was coming. "Just bring yourself," I told her. And for the first time in weeks, I was able to speak to her without feeling sick to my stomach. Because I knew this conversation was one of our last. The day before the Super Bowl, Tyler called to see if I wanted to come over early and help him set up folding chairs for the party. "Like old times," he said. "We can grab some wings and make predictions about the game." "I'll just see you at the party," I said. "I've got some things to take care of tomorrow." "Everything okay?" he asked, and I could hear genuine concern in his voice, which made it even worse somehow. Tyler wasn't just betraying me, he was doing it while pretending to care about my well-being. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just looking forward to the game." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the Super Bowl parties from previous years, how Tyler and I would stay up late after everyone left, cleaning up and talking about the game, about life, about our dreams and plans. How my parents would go to bed happy and tired, satisfied with another successful family gathering. After tomorrow, none of that would ever be the same. But I was ready. I was more ready than I'd ever been for anything in my life. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, typical Ohio weather for early February. I woke up earlier than usual, despite having barely slept, with that strange combination of nervousness and clarity that comes before a life-changing moment. Today was the day I would finally tell the truth, and nothing would ever be the same. I spent the morning getting ready with unusual care, choosing my clothes like I was preparing for a job interview or court appearance. I wanted to look calm, credible, not like someone who had lost his mind or was acting out of spite. I settled on dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt. Nothing too formal, but clean and put together. The party was set to start at 3 p.m., with kickoff scheduled for 6:30. I planned to arrive right on time, not early enough to help set up, but not late enough to draw attention. I wanted to be just another guest until the moment I chose to become something else entirely. I checked my phone one more time, making sure all the photos and screenshots were properly organized, that the timeline was clear and easy to follow. I had spent weeks preparing this evidence, and I knew it was bulletproof. No matter what Tyler and Sarah said after I revealed it, no one would be able to deny what they had done. At 2:45 p.m., I got in my car and started driving toward my parents' house. The streets were busier than usual with people heading to Super Bowl parties across town. And I found myself wondering how many of them were dealing with their own secrets and betrayals. How many families were hiding their own deceptions behind the facade of celebration and togetherness. My parents lived in the same split-level house where Tyler and I had grown up, on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees and well-maintained lawns. As I pulled into the driveway, I could see that several other guests had already arrived. Cars I recognized belonging to my aunts and uncles, family friends, neighbors who had been coming to my parents' Super Bowl parties for years. Through the front window, I could see people gathered in the living room, already talking and laughing, probably making their predictions about the game and sampling Mom's appetizers. It looked warm and welcoming, exactly like every other family gathering I could remember. The ordinariness of it made what I was about to do feel even more surreal. I I sat in my car for a moment, looking at that familiar scene through the window, knowing that in a few hours it would all be shattered. These people, my family, my parents' friends, were about to learn something that would change how they saw Tyler and Sarah forever. Some of them might never look at me the same way either. But I was done protecting other people from the truth. I was done being the only one who knew what was really going on. I walked up to the front door and let myself in, like I had thousands of times before. The house smelled like Mom's famous chili and Dad's homemade cornbread, comfort foods that usually made me feel safe and welcomed. Today, they just reminded me that this might be the last time I experience this house as a place of uncomplicated family happiness. "Jake," Mom called out from the kitchen, appearing in the doorway with a wooden spoon in her hand and a smile on her face. Perfect timing. I was just putting the finishing touches on everything. Sarah called about an hour ago and said she's bringing that layered taco dip everyone loved at Christmas. Of course she was. Sarah, still playing the part of the thoughtful, contributing girlfriend right up until the very end. Still making sure everyone would remember her fondly, right before they learned who she really was. "Sounds great, Mom," I said, giving her a hug that felt both familiar and final. "Everything smells incredible, as always." I made my way into the living room, where Dad was adjusting the settings on the big screen TV, while Uncle Mike and a few neighbors discussed their predictions for the game. Tyler was there too, sitting on the couch and looking completely relaxed, like he didn't have a care in the world. When he saw me, he got up and came over with his usual easy smile. "There he is," Tyler said, giving me the kind of brotherly hug we'd been exchanging our whole lives. "I was starting to think you might skip out on us. You've been pretty scarce lately." Looking at him, my younger brother, the person I had protected and supported and loved unconditionally for 23 years, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, obviously, and betrayal. But also sadness for what we were losing, and even a strange kind of pity for him. He had no idea that his entire life was about to implode. "Just been busy," I said. "Work stuff, you know how it is." We chatted for a few minutes about nothing important. The kind of easy conversation we'd had millions of times before. Tyler seemed genuinely happy to see me, asking about my job, telling me about some project he was working on, being the brother I had always thought he was. It made what he'd been doing behind my back even more incomprehensible. Around 4:30, Sarah arrived, and I watched from across the room as she made her entrance. She looked beautiful, as always. Her hair perfectly styled, wearing a red sweater that brought out the color in her cheeks, carrying a large glass dish that was presumably the famous taco dip. She moved through the room like she owned it, hugging my parents, greeting the other guests, fitting seamlessly into the gathering. When she saw me, her face lit up with what appeared to be genuine happiness. She came over and kissed me on the cheek, her perfume filling my nostrils with the scent that had once made me feel like the luckiest man alive, and now made me feel sick. "Hi, baby," she said quietly, squeezing my hand. "Sorry I'm a little late. I wanted to make sure the dip layers were perfect." "No problem at all," I replied, marveling at how normal my voice sounded. "I just got here myself." She settled in beside me on the couch, chatting with the other guests, laughing at Dad's jokes, asking Aunt Linda about her grandchildren. She was charming and engaged, and appeared to be having a wonderful time. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought she was the perfect girlfriend, grateful to be included in my family and genuinely fond of everyone there. But I did know better, and every smile, every laugh, every affectionate gesture toward my family felt like another layer of deception. She was performing, just like she had been performing for months, The first half of the game passed in a blur. I tried to focus on the action on screen, to participate in the conversations around me, to act like everything was normal. But I was constantly aware of the phone in my pocket, heavy with the evidence that would change everything. I found myself checking the clock obsessively, counting down the minutes until halftime. Sarah sat beside me throughout the first half, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand or make a comment about the game. A few times, I caught her and Tyler making eye contact across the room, quick glances that lasted just a moment longer than they should have. To anyone else, it would have looked innocent. Just two people who had become friends through their connection to me. But I knew what those looks really meant. At one point, Tyler got up to get another beer from the kitchen, and Sarah excused herself to go to the bathroom. I watched them both leave the room, and I was pretty sure I saw Tyler brush against Sarah's shoulder as they passed each other in the hallway. A tiny gesture that no one else would notice, but intimate in a way that made my stomach clench. They were still playing their game, even here, even surrounded by my family. They couldn't even keep their hands off each other for a few hours at a family party. As halftime approached, I felt my heart rate picking up. I excused myself and went to Dad's study, where I knew he kept his laptop. The computer was already connected to the big screen TV for the photo slideshow he usually did during halftime, showing pictures from family vacations and holidays from the past year. But today, there would be a different kind of slideshow. I quickly transferred my evidence folder to Dad's laptop, organizing the photos in the order I wanted to present them. My hands were shaking slightly, but my mind felt clear and focused. This was happening. After weeks of planning and preparing, I was finally going to tell the truth. When I came back to the living room, halftime was just beginning. Dad was getting ready to start his usual photo presentation, and everyone was settling in with fresh drinks and plates of food, ready for the entertainment portion of the evening. "Actually, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the casual chatter, "before you show the family photos, I have something I need to share with everyone." The room got quiet. All eyes turned to me, and I could see curiosity on most faces. Though Tyler looked slightly puzzled, and Sarah's smile seemed to freeze in place. "It's important," I continued, "and I think everyone here should see it." Dad looked confused, but handed me the laptop remote. "Okay, son. Whatever you need to show us." I took a deep breath and looked around the room at all these people I cared about. My parents, my relatives, family friends who had known me since I was a child. And Tyler and Sarah, still sitting there looking confused and innocent, still believing they had gotten away with everything. "For the past few months," I began, "I've been noticing some things that didn't quite add up. Small things at first, but they kept accumulating. Today, I want to share with all of you what I've discovered about two people we all trust and care about." I could see Sarah's face beginning to change, color draining from her cheeks. Tyler was sitting forward now, no longer relaxed, his eyes fixed on me with something that looked like the beginning of panic. "This first photo," I said, clicking to the first image, "was taken on New Year's Day. On the big screen, clear as day, was a photo of Sarah's car in Tyler's driveway. The timestamp was visible in the corner, showing it was taken at 2 p.m. on January 1st, hours after Sarah had told me she was at home having a quiet day. The room was completely silent. I could hear the TV announcers discussing the halftime show, but no one in the room was paying attention to anything except the screen. "This next photo," I continued, clicking ahead, "was taken the following week. Another image appeared. Sarah and Tyler walking hand in hand through that park on the other side of town, clearly comfortable with each other, clearly more than friends. And this one," I said, advancing to the next slide, was taken 3 days ago. The final photo filled the screen. Tyler kissing Sarah in his driveway, the jewelry box visible in his hands, both of them looking like lovers celebrating a special moment. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see shock on every face, but the expressions I was most focused on were Tyler's and Sarah's. Tyler had gone completely pale and was staring at the screen like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Sarah had tears forming in her eyes, but whether they were from guilt or anger, I couldn't tell. "There are more photos," I said quietly, "and other evidence. But I think everyone here gets the picture." Finally, someone spoke. It was my mother. "I don't understand," she said, her voice small and confused. "Sarah, Tyler, what is this? What's going on?" Sarah burst into tears then, covering her face with her hands. But Tyler stood up, and I could see anger replacing the shock in his expression. "Jake, what the hell is wrong with you?" he said, his voice louder than the situation called for. "Why are you stalking us? Why are you taking pictures of us without our permission?" "I'm not stalking you," I replied, amazed at how calm I sounded. "I'm documenting the affair you've been having behind my back for months." The word affair seemed to hit the room like a physical blow. Several people gasped, and I saw my father stand up from his chair. "That's enough," Dad said firmly. "Everyone needs to calm down and explain what's happening here." But Tyler wasn't calming down. He was getting more agitated, and I could see him trying to figure out how to spin this situation, how to make me look like the villain. "This is insane," Tyler said, gesturing toward the screen. "Jake has obviously been following us around, taking pictures out of context, trying to make innocent interactions look like something they're not. Sarah and I are friends. We hang out sometimes. That doesn't mean we're having an affair." "Friends don't kiss like that," I said, clicking back to the image of them in Tyler's driveway. "And friends don't lie about where they are when they're together." Sarah was still crying, but now she looked up at me with something that looked like hatred. "You had no right," she said, her voice shaky but angry. "You had no right to follow us, to spy on us, to violate our privacy like this. I had every right to investigate when my girlfriend was lying to me about where she was spending her time." I shot back. "I had every right to find out why my own brother was sneaking around behind my back." The room erupted then, with multiple conversations happening at once. My parents were trying to get answers from Tyler and Sarah. Uncle Mike was asking what was going on. Aunt Linda was trying to calm everyone down. Other guests were looking uncomfortable and probably wishing they'd stayed home. But through all the chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. The truth was finally out. No more pretending, no more lies, no more making me feel like I was going crazy for noticing things that were actually happening. Tyler was still trying to control the narrative, claiming that Sarah and I had broken up weeks ago and that their relationship had started after that. But I was ready for this lie too. "Sarah," I said, cutting through his explanation, "when did we break up? Because I seem to remember having lunch with you on New Year's Day, making plans for the weekend. I remember you telling me you loved me just last Tuesday." She couldn't answer, couldn't even look at me. The timeline made it impossible for Tyler's story to be true, and everyone in the room could see it. My mother, who had been silent for the past few minutes, finally spoke again. "Sarah," she said, and her voice was different now, colder, more formal. "Is this true? Have you been seeing Tyler while you were dating Jake?" Sarah nodded through her tears, unable to speak. Tyler, Dad said, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Is this how we raised you? To lie to your family? To betray your brother? Tyler's anger finally collapsed into something that looked like shame. He sat back down heavily, put his head in his hands, and for the first time since this all started, he looked like the little brother I used to protect from playground bullies. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said quietly. We didn't plan it. We fell in love. We didn't want to hurt anyone. But you did hurt people, Mom said, and I could hear that she was crying now too. You hurt Jake. You hurt this family. You made us all complicit in your lies. The party was obviously over. Guests started making awkward excuses and heading for the door, probably grateful to escape the family drama. Within 20 minutes, it was just the four of us. Me, Tyler, Sarah, and my parents. Sarah tried to approach me, tried to say something about how sorry she was, but I held up my hand to stop her. Don't, I said. Just don't. There's nothing you can say that will make this okay. She left shortly after that, and I could hear her car engine starting in the driveway, driving away from our family for the last time. Tyler stayed longer, trying to explain himself to our parents, trying to make them understand how the relationship had developed. But there was no explanation that could make the betrayal acceptable. He had chosen Sarah over his own brother, had chosen deception over honesty, had chosen his own desires over family loyalty. When he finally left, the house felt empty and sad in a way I'd never experienced before. The Super Bowl was still playing on TV, but no one was watching. The food was still laid out on the kitchen counter, but no one was eating. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I told my parents. I'm sorry I had to ruin your party to tell you the truth. You didn't ruin anything, Dad said firmly. They did. Tyler and Sarah did this, not you. Mom hugged me then, and I could feel her shaking with emotion. I'm so proud of you for telling us, she said. I know that must have been incredibly difficult. It was difficult, but it was also liberating. For the first time in months, I didn't have to carry the secret anymore. I didn't have to pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't have to question my own sanity or feel guilty for suspecting the truth. The aftermath wasn't easy. Tyler tried calling me several times over the next few weeks, wanting to talk, wanting to explain, wanting forgiveness. I didn't answer. Sarah sent long text messages, apologizing and saying she never meant for things to happen the way they did. I deleted them without reading past the first few sentences. My parents were devastated. Mom blamed herself, wondering if she had somehow encouraged the relationship by being so welcoming to Sarah. Dad was angry at Tyler for months, barely speaking to him when he came around to pick up belongings he'd left at the house over the years. The hardest part was accepting that the brother I thought I knew had never really existed. The Tyler who would have protected me, who would have put family loyalty above his own desires, who would have been honest with me even when the truth was difficult. That person was either gone or had never been real in the first place. But I also discovered things about myself that I hadn't known before. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could handle devastating betrayal without falling apart completely. I learned that I valued honesty more than peace, truth more than comfort. I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. 3 months later, I heard through mutual friends that Tyler and Sarah had moved in together in a different town about 2 hours away. Apparently, they were telling people that their relationship had started after Sarah and I broke up, that it was all very innocent and natural. Some people probably believed them. People like to believe in love stories more than betrayal stories. But I knew the truth, and so did my parents, and so did everyone who had been at that Super Bowl party. The people who mattered knew exactly what kind of people Tyler and Sarah really were. 6 months after that terrible New Year's Eve, I started dating again. It took time to trust my instincts with women, to believe that not everyone was capable of the level of deception that Sarah had shown me. But gradually, I learned to open my heart again, more carefully this time, but still genuinely. I never got back the relationship I'd had with Tyler before all this happened. Too much damage had been done, too much trust had been broken. We see each other at family gatherings now, and we're polite, but we're not brothers in any meaningful sense anymore. Maybe someday that will change, but maybe it won't. And I've made peace with both possibilities. The most important thing I learned from the whole experience was that living in truth, even when it's painful, is better than living in a lie, even when the lie feels comfortable. That New Year's Eve when I stood alone on my parents' back porch, feeling confused and hurt and wondering if I was going crazy. That was the last time I ever doubted myself when my instincts told me something was wrong. I never did find out exactly when their affair started, whether it began before Sarah and I were serious or if it developed gradually over the months we were together. In the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they made a choice to deceive me, and I made a choice to uncover the truth and live in reality instead of their carefully constructed fantasy. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing them so publicly, if I wish I had handled it differently. The answer is no. Tyler and Sarah had made dozens of choices over months to lie to me and to my family. They had involved my parents in their deception by allowing them to welcome Sarah and plan for her future as part of our family. They had made everyone at that Super Bowl party complicit in their lies by maintaining their fake personas in front of people who cared about them. They chose to make their affair a public deception, so I chose to make the truth public as well. That seemed fair to me then, and it still seems fair to me now. The last time I spoke to Sarah was about a year later, when she called me out of the blue one evening. She said she wanted to apologize, to explain her side of what had happened, to somehow make things right between us. I listened for about 2 minutes before I realized that even her apology was self-serving, designed more to make her feel better than to acknowledge the damage she'd done. "Sarah," I said, interrupting her in the middle of a sentence about how she'd never meant to hurt anyone. "I forgave you a long time ago, because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you in my life, and it doesn't mean I need to listen to your explanations. We're done. We've been done since that New Year's Eve when you chose to lie to me instead of telling me the truth." I hung up, and I've never heard from her since. Tyler and I have spoken a few times over the years, usually at family holidays when we can't avoid each other entirely. The conversations are superficial, work, weather, sports, but they're civil. He's never directly apologized for what he did, and I've never asked for an apology. We both know what happened, and we both know it can't be undone. My parents eventually rebuilt their relationship with Tyler, though it took almost 2 years and was never quite the same as it had been before. Mom says she still loves him because he's her son, but she doesn't trust him the way she used to. Dad is more practical about it. He treats Tyler like a family member who happens to live far away, someone he's pleasant with but not particularly close to. As for me, I'm happier now than I was during those months when I was living in Sarah and Tyler's web of lies. I have a job I enjoy, friends who are honest with me, and a girlfriend who, after 2 years together, has never given me reason to doubt her word about anything. Small things, maybe. But they feel huge to someone who spent months questioning his own perception of reality. The house where my parents live looks the same as it always did. But family gatherings feel different now. Smaller, sadder in some ways, but also more genuine. We don't have to pretend that Tyler is the golden child anymore, or that every girlfriend who charms my parents is automatically trustworthy. We've all learned to be a little more careful with our hearts. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. I still think about that New Year's Eve sometimes, about standing in the hallway of my parents' house with evidence of betrayal literally in my hands, knowing that I was about to change everything for everyone I loved. It was terrifying and liberating and necessary all at the same time. But mostly, I'm grateful. Grateful that I trusted my instincts. Grateful that I chose truth over comfort. Grateful that I learned who people really were before I wasted any more years of my life believing in lies. Some stories don't have happy endings in the traditional sense. This isn't a story about forgiveness and reconciliation and families coming back together stronger than before. This is a story about truth, and sometimes the truth just changes everything permanently. But living in truth, even when it's difficult, even when it's lonely, even when it means losing people you thought you loved, that's still better than living in someone else's lie.